Hello everyone, Coach Carole here. This session is all about ancestral story tips. And I wanted to share with you the latest package of these that I've been working on for the Christmas season. As genealogists, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say, in order to write your ancestral story, you need to make it interesting. And there are so many ways you can do that. And these tips will show you a few of those that I've gathered recently. And I've been exploring how to put those out into my social media networks for everyone to enjoy. So you may have seen some of these in Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Let's have a look at some of these. But I'll preface it first with this question. This one appeared in many of my social media accounts recently where the genealogists are gathering, and the question arose, which ancestor or ancestors are at the top of your research list and why? So I thought that was a really great question to begin planning for your research and storytelling for next year. With that in mind, I established, I think about 10 of these, I can't remember now, 8 to 10 of these ancestors that I want to put on the top of my research list for 2022. And I have begun to map those out. And in this series of tips, I will show you what I'm doing with those as I plan my ancestral stories. This is where I plan for my ancestral stories using Trello. I find it really useful to be able to plot and plan my ancestral research and the stories I'm going to tell in cards, in lists. So as you can see here, maybe you can't see it very clearly, but the first one is February 2022, and then March, April, May, and June. And I have already put in place the names of the ancestors that I want to research. So in February, it'll be Charles Newland. In March, it'll be William Wright. In April, Lydia Rule. In May, it will be Thomas Julius Pompey Blackburn, and in June, Jemima Clayton, with all different themes in mind. In the first case, it's looking for a marriage, or it might be a military record, something to do with their occupations, where they lived, what is it about that family name, or what's the history of the first name in some of the families. So I've made a start on that, and at the end of this presentation I'll show you my progress. The first tip that I have for you really resonated very loudly for me. Don't wait until you've got all your research done. Start writing your ancestral story as you research. It will help you and motivate you to go further, deeper, and wider. The second tip is to begin with a hook to engage your readers. And that hook could be something intriguing, something shocking, something puzzling, or a statement or a quote that will resonate for your readers. Take that a step further and add that thought or statement for intrigue right into the opening paragraph of your story. Put your readers right in that same space as you're working through your research, and think about what's going to attract them to read this story. When you're describing parts of your story, you'll want to transport the reader directly into the action immediately. That is one of the best hooks in my books, making sure that they are already immersed in something that's happening, something that makes them sit up and listen, or at least want to find out more. The next tip is to reveal your characters through meaningful dialogue. It took me a while to learn how to write the dialogue in a meaningful way, but you'll get used to it. Imagine your ancestors and the conversations that they might have, and reveal their own true characters through what they say. The next tip is to pose a rhetorical question. This could be right in your opening sentence. Why? Where? Who? What? When? These types of rhetorical questions can engage your reader immediately. They'll want to keep reading to find the answer to this question. You could find some really engaging quotes from the great minds from the past to begin a chapter for your ancestral stories. These might be found in many different places that you can research on the web, such as the authors of books, poets, and famous leaders, or something more esoteric, something that your own family members have been often heard to say. So begin with a quote to engage the minds of your readers. The next tip is to thrust your readers into a scene using one or two of the 5 senses. What is it they will see? What is it they can hear? Or what can they smell or feel? Any of those senses will be a really interesting way to start your story, or at least to put into a scene when you're describing what it is your ancestors are experiencing. Bring it to life with the 5 senses so that you can feel, see, hear, etc. what's going on in this ancestral story. The next tip is to focus on a character in the opening paragraph of your story. This one I really like because this one is an easy one to start with. When you've researched your ancestor, you know that person. So you want to begin with the focus on that ancestor in the opening paragraph of your story. Where are they? What are they doing? Why is this scene important to them? The next tip, use setting descriptions to transport your readers directly into the story location. If you're talking about England in the 1820s, do a little research and find out what was happening then. What was the climate like? What was happening in politics? What was happening with revolutions or changes in government, etc. So transport your readers there to the story location. Describe where it is that this story is taking place. This next tip is a useful one when you are researching, and to include that data right up front to provide a historical backdrop for this ancestral story. In my coaching course that I've set up for next year, beginning in January, I'm going to step through all of these tips that I've shared with you today and to help you provide a historical backdrop for your family history stories. And there are 5 little prompts here on this slide. If you need help with setting up, creating and publishing your ancestral stories in blog posts or in books, this course will help you. If you need coaching assistance when setting up a WordPress site, if you're going down the trail of blogging your stories, then this course will help you with that. It will also step you through the process of setting up, managing and working in WordPress. This is my favourite tool for blogging, that is, and for other website development. In the course, I will have a weekly Zoom meeting in which I'll be giving you tips and tricks, and these will be related to each of the modules in the first 4 weeks of the course. Then during February, as you develop your skills in writing your stories, you can have one-on-one coaching calls with me if you need. And these will be, you can connect with me and request a particular time and date for those. The final tip that I'm including here today is to document an epic journey. So get into the mind of your ancestor and find out what it was that drove them on this journey, what happened to them, what it felt like for them, how did that impact on the rest of their family, and create a story that is compelling for your readers from start to finish. So on this slide, I have included the coaching course schedule to tell you that there's a live call on January 2nd, January 8, January 15, and January 22nd. And then your individual coaching is on demand. And the course ends in February, but you still have access to everything that's in it, all my videos and all my exercises for you. So it doesn't go away at the end of February. That's just when the live components are completed. You'll also be able to communicate with people in a private Facebook group so that you can share the development of your stories and the writing of your epic journey for your ancestors. Let me now stop sharing my screen on this page and bring you over to a new share screen to show you my progress in my Trello board. So I'm going now to Trello.com, where I've set up this planning board for my ancestral stories for 2022. So you saw the beginning of that in one of the slides. Now here is the development. I'm focusing in on the January one and getting a head start so that I've got something to come to terms with immediately January begins, and I'll use some of that in the coaching course. I'm focused on a particular ancestor called John Cutting and finding his marriage to his wife Anne Craddock, which I have already done, and I want to dig a little deeper. So I'm going to now share with you what's on each of these cards to show you my planning so far. So here in this card, it gives a description of the church in which they were married, the Holy Trinity, in a wonderful little village called Penton Musey in Hampshire, United Kingdom. And in my research of that village, I have found wonderful descriptions of the church, and I can include that in the story. And here is a view of the church, a little bigger for you to see. Then I have researched the birth of John Cutting and copied the transcript from Find My Past, which is my favourite tool for research. And I've got that data already in place in here so that I can refer back to it. And one of the interesting facts was that he was born and baptized in 1800, and his birth date was the 4th of May. So keep that in mind for a moment. And a little bit more about the village itself. So I've done some further research on Penton Musey from Wikipedia, to find out a little bit more about the village as it might have been back in the 1820s and what it's like now. So I can include some of that in the story. Interestingly, it said that the Holy Trinity Church dates from the 14th century. So that's another little clue for me to include in the story. So I went further into my research for 1826 to find out what was happening in Britain at the time. And I found that in the month of August, from the month of June to August, they had a 3-month heat wave. It's not quite the heat wave that you might expect these days, but for them it was the hottest summer on record. So another little clue to include in my writing. And one more fact here on the death, and some more information to see that he was, in fact, have I got the right data there? The death quarter is the 2nd, but the actual date of the death was in May as well. And the marriage date was May. So this May, the month of May, is cropping up quite often for this person. So I've gone ahead now and made a start on my story outline with some scenes and words that I've used, my tips that I've shown you in my slides a moment ago, to start writing the story. So some opening scenes, alternatives, and what's to go into the next paragraph. So I've just started rambling, really, and thinking about what it was like in Penton Museum as they were getting ready for their wedding in May. And I'm including the fact that it was hot and that they lived in a farm, so they're in a village where things were agricultural, and the time of the year and what was happening for the people who lived in the village and so on. So there's a whole heap of story outlines being added to my list. And that's just for John. Then I can move to February, March, April and so on and repeat the process, focusing in on my main research area and begin writing the story. So that's it for this session on how you can plan to write your ancestral stories as you begin to research.